Welcome back to The Loop, a bold and fresh look at our lives in Kenya. And today we're taking a bold look at this constitution of ours. 10 years down the line, what has this constitution done for you? Has it changed your life? And thank you so much for your responses. I'm very encouraged by what a lot of you are saying. And there's one response here that says, hey there, I think the constitution has helped me to express myself in the innermost secrets that we have and keep. And with a lot of regard to those who are being abused, you know, looking at the vulnerable populations. Shadrach Muli, thank you, says, I don't understand the need of changing an ill-implemented constitution. Kenyans were optimistic in the year 2010, but their hopes have been proved futile. The Loop. Constitution 2010 is good for Kenya if fully implemented. The problem is that some people think it's not good enough because they're not in power, so they prefer its amendment. So there are people who are left out in the cold and they're feeling, ikitu nitamu, but out in the cold. Hey, good evening. I'm Brian Omae from Nairobi. I can say that the Constitution have not done nothing to the government because all the leaders are undermining the law. Of course, they must upgrade with some mentorship. Okay. Hello, I'm Frederick Odhiambo from Homa Bay. Hello, Frederick. He says, why do MPs want Kazi Mtaani dropped? Okay. The Katiba talks of gender, but they just reward their family members and girlfriends. As it stands, it's terrible to elect women, that, the ones who are there have taught us a lesson. Constitution has not bore any fruit since 2010, so changing it is not a solution. Wow. A lot of, you know, very deep thoughts there, impassioned pleas about what we should do. Hello, Kenyans, we are always complaining. We have not achieved much, including the not limited to freedom. Sorry, that seems to have disappeared. There's another one here. He says, the Constitution, it favors leaders at the expense of common mwananchi. Valentine?
Very interesting responses there. Thank you so much. Our WhatsApp number is at the bottom of the screen, so feel free to continue sending us your thoughts. And Commissioner Lichuma brought up the subject of money. It's very important. Why aren't women accessing affordable credit? We've had like the Women's Fund, we've had Uwezo Fund, we've had the Youth Fund, and many other funds. Why aren't they working?
I think a part of it, let's not forget that a lot of these funds are very small. It's a very minuscule amount, by the way. They have big names, but not in terms of funding and quantum, they are not significant. But secondly, is that the way they are structured, they also tend to benefit primarily women who either have property, who have access to assets that they can use as security. And then also, there's also, in terms of either people who access, I don't think we've had a very effective capacity building framework that enables those women who then access those monies to be able to convert it into good resources. So I think there's a fundamental problem in terms of quantum. There's a problem in terms of accessibility, but there's also a problem in terms of the usability of those funds once they are obtained. So even when they are there, they are not able to do a lot of conversion on the lives of families as one would have expected. But yeah.
I got a chance to serve as a board member representing women on the board of Uwezo Fund.
Okay.
For a 3-year term. And it was interesting just going around the country educating women, young people and persons with disability on how to access the funds, what to use for the funds for, and you know, all that. And it was interesting, according to statistics by the time I was leaving office, more women, about over 70% of the beneficiaries had been women. And just about maybe 25 or so were young people, and then maybe a distant 3% or so persons with disability. And from my own observation, I saw that women in urban centers benefited much, much more because they knew the rigors of the application process, the system and all that. But people within the deepest parts of the country, the rural areas, less information, less exposure, I think few of them were able to benefit. So definitely the place of information sharing, education for these women, regardless of class and region in the country, to be able to access these funds would definitely be very helpful.
So capacity building for sure has to go hand in hand with it. Yeah. Is it possible, in your experience, like you ran for office very early and then, you know, you created emerging leaders, you're seeing young people. Is it possible to use something like Uwezo Fund and actually get yourself into a position where you can run for office? Like build a business or, you know, earn a living and get into a position where you need, because we hear it's millions and millions. Is it possible?
So I think one thing that is really critical is that leadership is not necessarily just political leadership. Political leadership is just a part, an aspect of leadership. We have leaders in the corporate world, leaders in communities, leaders in families. So I think a lot of times we elevate politics much, much more than other forms of leadership. But of course, political leadership is really, really important because that's where policies are made and all that. So if someone is passionate about politics and they realize that, you know what, my purpose is politics and I want to serve my people, I want to make a difference, then by all means, get somebody to coach you, to guide you, to mentor you, and you can get into business, start saving some money, or get coached and trained and then get to run for office, or look for institutions that are giving funding to women to run, and then go run. But then if you're not passionate about it, or you're not even clear about your vision once you get elected, then don't do that. Because then you get into that place, and that's where I think wrong things begin to happen. People start getting corrupt, people start getting funny tenders, start trading with their own counties and ministries. It is just sort of, and that's why I think Article 10 of the Constitution, I think we're really doing badly in terms of values. And it's not just in the political space, it's in the corporate world, it's in civil society, it's in the media, it's everywhere, it's in families.
Yes.
So I think one of the biggest ways forward is socialization. How are we parenting our boys and girls? I think it would really, really be important for parents to realize that how we bring up our daughters and boys needs to be in a way that they realize they're equal and they need to access equal opportunities, so that then they grow up and get into parliament. They don't start fighting women and saying that, you know, if we elevate women and pass this 2/3 gender rule, that women will come and displace us or take our space. They realize it's a partnership, because that is the reality. It's a partnership between men and women. But when we leave out women, we're missing out on a key component of a huge population that would make a difference in our country.
You're making me think that even our curriculum should necessitate female leadership, even in schools.
Absolutely.
So that it starts from even when you're a 6-year-old, 8-year-old boy, that you can actually see a girl in leadership, a young woman in leadership. And so the paradigm we were saying that needs to shift.
We need to shift. And to see, you see, part of the problem is we've seen women leadership as a women's issue. You know, that we need to elevate women. You know, this is a social issue. It's about whether we are a complete society. It's whether we get the benefit of all the elements of our society. When you exclude 50% of the population from the critical positions where decisions are made, we suffer as a society, including the men. And I think that's what you need to internalize. But we have a certain, it is shocking for me, when I used to go to parliament and we'd be discussing a 2/3 gender, the men leaders will almost get violent about this space. We've allowed the women to come in. How can they be demanding more? We already have given them a third. You know, so it's something that we need to internalize and to socialize our kids from when they're in nursery school. That you need, it's good for society when all genders, when all aspects of society are represented in leadership.
And if nothing else, just from an economic perspective, as Commissioner Lichuma pointed out, companies do better when they have more women even in leadership. We as a country would do better if more women were working, more women were paying taxes. If nothing else, we'd have a bigger budget to allocate to education and health than anything else, right?
I have a question. You see, because when you talk to people about this constitution, because that's, you know, today we are looking at what has this constitution done for you. I think there was this feeling when the constitution was promulgated that the constitution would address immediate needs that Kenyans have, you know. And when you flip open the constitution, you'll find brilliant things, right to health, right to housing, freedom from discrimination, you know, those sorts of things. But yet, here are situations where people find it very difficult to connect what they're going through with the promise of the constitution. So for example, you're somebody in a hospital and you could not pay your hospital bill, and it's ballooning by the day, and the hospital decides to detain you. Yet when you look at right to health, you know, it talks about things like, you know, emergency medical treatment. It looks at things like you cannot be detained because you could not pay your bill. So at that point, you're sitting there in your hospital bed and you're saying, but the constitution says, and it's not helping me. Or you've been evicted from an informal settlement, and the constitution talks about rights to housing. And then you're trying to find, how do I connect that gap between my immediate needs and the promise of the constitution? Kabalo, how do you do that?
I think several things. I think sometimes we forget that we are operating in an extremely unfortunate situation where our problems go very deep. And the challenges we have in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of the level of poverty, is very extreme. And so there are certain things that the Constitution is not going to be able to do in 10 years. But I think to be positive, I was reading a report just this week. It was released in 2016. I think it's called the Kenya Household Integrated Budget Survey. And it said that looking at indicators of poverty between 2013 and 2016, which is when devolution came into place, that the poverty rate reduced by the largest margin since independence. Because the reality is that there was a certain level of percolating of resources down to the grassroots, which had not happened before. The problem is our needs were so deep that a lot of Kenyans actually don't feel it. And it will take a while for that to happen. And I think that there's a huge responsibility for us in the next 10 years of the Constitution to answer the question is, now we have spent a lot of time dealing with issues of leadership and institutions at the elite level. How do we now translate the Constitution to answer that question so that it makes sense to Ajiko that we have a new Constitution? Now we have all the structures. How do we ensure that they have better health? What program are we instituting so that the Constitution makes sense? Article 43, the right to health, right to food and all that. How do we ensure that that is our focus in the next 10 years, not just creating more institutions? Then that question does not arise 20 years from now.
And I think Commissioner Lichuma is also still with us. And I'd like to ask her, because, this is a question of resources. And so, for example, we have devolution now, resources decentralized to the counties. What is the role of Mwananchi in saying, some of these issues that I'm facing is because I am resource strapped? What does Mwananchi need to be able to do to be able to have a say in how some of those resources are spent and prioritized?
Mike, may I come in?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I think there are a few things that I need to correct so that we get right. In terms of the resources that the government has put aside in terms of access for women, persons with disabilities, and the marginalized, I think the government has done well. It's only that the monies are given in little bits. And, of course, the report that has been done about it is that women have been able to go places with the money. There are those who have improved education, their families, they put up houses, they've gone into small businesses, but the money is not that large that can get them doing big things. But for Caro, you cannot use this money to run for politics. And two, there is no donor in this country or elsewhere who puts money aside for people to use in politics. So, UN Women will have money aside, and the money will be for capacity building, preparing you to be a leader, showing you what to do. But when it comes to the actual campaign, the expectation is you must have money from your pocket, which most of the women would be using family resources, and you need to get permission here and there if those who have families. Government has also done very well in terms of the 30% procurement. So I don't want us to miss that women have been allowed, women, youth, persons with disabilities, to trade with the government at 30%. But the most sad thing is that we will have companies fronted for by women, but behind that we have men trading. Why? Because sometimes the bids are so high that women organizations cannot afford. Now, payment from the government has also been very slow. I know a number of youth, a number of women who did businesses with the national government or the county government, and they didn't get paid. So at the end of the day, you get all the resources you put in, you don't get it back, and you get into debt. The next minute, you'll get the auctioneers at your door. So, I mean, the intentions are good, but the question I have, who do we hold accountable? For who? For what?
Who do we hold accountable?
The
That's
government
a very,
would say,
very good
we
question.
have given the services.
Yes, that's a very good question. And I think that's something that we need to keep at the back of our mind.
The money is there. The women, what is stopping you? Because every entity in this country is able to put aside some resources for women, for persons with disabilities.
Right.
Why aren't the women in this country accessing those resources? Again, you come back into issues of poverty, into issues of credit. The women do not have the collateral to put for credit to get the money from the banks. So in the process is a good gesture, but without implementation framework, it goes unutilized.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point
who
that
do we
the
hold
Commission
accountable
has raised. Yes, who do we hold accountable, and who has the role and responsibility to hold the duty bearers accountable? The ones who have the responsibility to ensure these frameworks are there and that resources trickle down the way that they should.
Let me ask you, we are running out of time, so I want to hear from each of you a hard-hitting fact. If you are in charge of this gender equality issue, what would you do? What is the one thing that you would prioritize over everything else that you believe would make a huge difference in terms of achieving gender equality?
Allow me two things, because one, they address different issues, but I think that are critical on the gender question. On women in leadership, I would give incentives to political parties that have women in parliament, women in county assemblies, and women in, I would give financial incentives.
Nice.
So that then parties actually fight to have women because there's a benefit to them. That's on women leadership. I think the more critical question on the gender issue in Kenya is empowering women, particularly rural women, because a lot of the decisions that are made about families, about girls in education, about even boys in education are made by women particularly in the rural areas and even in the vitogojis. And I think the more we empower women at that level, the more we're going to have a society that's a little more inclusive, because women understand the cost of being excluded.
Right.
And so if we can invest more there, families will be stronger, families will do better, will invest more in education, families will be healthier, and as a society will be better. And then those women are able to make decisions on what are good leaders, because even in terms of exposure and awareness, they'll have better exposure and better awareness. So I'd invest at those two levels, in terms of ensuring women are getting into politics through political parties, and then also strengthening them, particularly in the rural areas.
Okay, thank you. Caren, your hard-hitting fact, please.
I would work on political financing. For political campaign. I know bills have been brought up just before elections on political campaign financing, but then they've never seen the light of day. But I think that would be so critical in making sure the marginalized individuals are able to comfortably run for office. Because right now, as it is so expensive to run for office. And like Commissioner Winnie says, there are maybe non-existent institutions that would say, here is money, please go run. They will build your capacity, but then make sure, imagine that you actually have money somewhere to then go and run. So political campaign financing, I would work on that. But beyond that, implementation of Article 10 of the Constitution, national values, because everything rises and falls on leadership. And the challenges we're seeing, I think the root causes is actually leadership. One of the biggest root causes is leadership. And we are seeing a lot of individuals in positions of leadership, but very little leadership, very little values. Like, look at the level of corruption and loss of funds and resources almost everywhere. It's a question of leadership. So I think we need to grow leaders, but also realize as Kenyans that we are responsible for our own destiny as a nation. Like, rise up, ask the difficult question, have an awakening. Don't just sit back and say, politics is not mine.
Okay, I love that. Thank you so much. Do we still have Commissioner Lichuma on the... okay, thank you so much for joining us. Are you still...
Sure, I am. I'm still here, and I need to give you my parting shot.
Yes, please.
Okay, I would change the equation I began with. I would look at the old challenges, new hopes, and this is what I would do. For the appointing positions, I would ensure that all the appointing bodies make sure they comply with the 2/3 gender rule, number one. Number two, I would then ensure that there is respect of the law. We have pending judgments on the 2/3 gender rule. I would pick those judgments and have them implemented immediately. So if I was in Parliament and I know that Parliament would be dissolved, I would immediately then get the framework up working in terms of meeting the rule of law. Because, I mean, rule of law cannot be redressed, then we are preparing for anarchy. So in this country, I think we must learn just to respect the rule of law and do the right thing in the at the right time. The courts have spoken. The implementers must take this and implement.
Okay.
Lastly, I would read the Constitution and implement it to the latter. But to do this, I would cost this Constitution. Where the rain started beating us is we gave ourselves a new Constitution, celebrated about it, and never costed the implementation. You cannot tell me that it's expensive to implement the gender rule, yet it was expensive to set up the 47 counties. It was expensive to set up the 47 county assemblies. Why does it become expensive when it comes to matters women? And lastly, I would ensure that once the elected and nominated members get to the houses, be it in the National Assembly, be it in the Senate, be it in the County Assembly, they are given the same opportunities in terms of financial resources, offices, so that they all become members of Assembly, members of the Senate, members of Parliament. I don't know why we are having this disaggregated way of looking at the elected and the nominated. The law says they all are members of Parliament. Let's respect the law.
Yes. Thank you very much, Commissioner Lichuma. Thank you so much for joining us from your home. And to our guests, Asanteni Sana. I have taken a personal challenge on this as I was researching the subject. I started asking myself, as a woman, what have I done to make sure that I'm involved even in the political process? And I will confess, on national TV, I don't know who my MCA is. I'm serious. I have been negligent, and I don't think I'm the only woman. No. So as much as I'm saying I want gender equality, there's work for me to do, and I'm sure I'm not the only Kenyan woman who needs to know who her MCA is and get involved in this process even more.
Exactly. I think we all have a responsibility to ensure that we deliver the promise of this Constitution. It's been a fantastic show. Thank you so much to all our panelists who've been here. And of course, you at home who've been watching all the amazing messages that have been coming through. Please keep them coming, and we'll sample them as we go along. And the WhatsApp number is still on the line. Don't go too far. When we come back, Unplugged, where we give artists and creatives an opportunity to express themselves right here in studio. We've got two amazing guests you do not want to miss. But right now, that's it for us on The Loop.